Hi again then guys, and welcome to the second part of the two Audi Vision GT breakdowns. Yesterday of course we looked at the Group X version, which is technically what you'd assume would be the much more extreme of the two cars, and in some ways it could appear to be. It's got over 800 horsepower, it's still all-wheel drive as this one is as well, and of course being Group X, you'd assume that you'd have the full free reign of what it's capable of. But that's the funny thing, because I would say that this is the better car. Now it's interesting because in the comments of yesterday's review I saw some people saying that this is a great one, some people saying that they hated this one, the Group 1 variant. So I went into it with an idea of what to expect, because of course having already driven the Group X car you would assume that to some degree it's similar. It's a little bit lighter, a little bit less powerful. I expected it to be essentially a more restrained version of the same essential thing. And in some ways you could say that that's the case, but in reality they're very different cars. Now the Group X version I would definitely say is far easier to push hard, because as I mentioned in that video, that car has a tendency to understeer quite a lot under throttle, which makes it quite heavy. It's got a ton of grip through corners, and it's actually very beginner friendly. There are very few cars with that kind of power and performance which are as easy to drive as that one is. This one on the other hand, it will bite back actually. The car will straight up spin out even with all-wheel drive. And one of the reasons why is because of the fact that it's a hybrid, so you only actually get full all-wheel drive when you're exiting a corner, in a similar way to Le Mans hybrids. So although the car's rated at 735 horsepower, which is of course less, it's actually got a lot more when you're exiting a corner. It's actually 1274 horsepower. Now the engine itself is pushing that 735, 516 pound-feet of torque, all of course to the rear wheels with the motor powering the front. Now the car itself is already 200 kilos lighter than the Group X car, and that's mainly because of the battery pack on the Group X version. That's a 1450 kilo car. This one on the other hand is only 1250. But that's not where it ends, because this one in Group 1 can be dropped to 800 kilos. Now even in its stock form, 735 horsepower, 1250 kilos, that's already got a better horsepower per tonne than the Group X car, 588 to that car's 554. But listen to these numbers. If you reduce the weight on this car as far as it can go, which as I said is 800 kilos, you're now looking at 919 horsepower per tonne. Then, when you factor in the boost from the front end when you're exiting corners, that means that for about a second to 2 seconds out of a corner, you are quite literally putting out 1593 horsepower per tonne, which is absolutely insane. That is literally Red Bull or Tomahawk territory. But that's the funny thing. How on earth can a car like this be in Group 1 when the car that's heavier and less powerful and slower, in some cases through corners, being Group X? It's very strange. Now I get it, I get why they did it that way around, especially once you factor in of course balance of performance, for instance, where you'll very rarely get to drop the weight by that much. But the thing that's added on top of that is that this one isn't as quick as you might hope, because with 1.6 horsepower for every kilo of its weight, which is, as I said, close to 1600 horsepower per metric tonne, you would expect it to be able to take on stuff like the Formula car, or a Red Bull, or a Tomahawk. Now in some ways it can, but in some ways it might even underwhelm you a little bit in terms of its lap potential, especially given the huge spec, because I found this car on here, the 24-hour circuit, to be quite a lot slower actually than the Formula car. Now the Formula car is incredibly quick, but to put it into even better perspective with another Group 1 car, I found that this car was only 8 seconds quicker than my Toyota Le Mans hybrid, which doesn't sound quite as impressive as you might hope, given the massive spec on this car. Now it's not slow, not by any means, neither is the Toyota, but it's not quite as quick as I was assuming it would be. And the thing about driving this Group 1 version is you need to definitely approach it with a different mindset and a different driving style than with the Group X car. As I already said, the Group X version is heavy, in terms of throttle steering. It's got a lot of understeer, a ton of grip, it's very forgiving but very heavy, and also you need to brake quite early, because not only does the weight keep you going like a train trying to slow down, but also the brakes are just relatively dull in general, especially compared to a lot of the other Group X cars. This one, on the other hand, almost cancels out all of the bad points of that one. It's lighter, the brakes are incredible on this car, but whereas the other one is very forgiving, this one actually isn't, because you only get grip to the front end as soon as you floor it out of a corner. Once that front end disengages and you're just essentially a rear-wheel drive car again, this car can actually bite back, and if you try to make some very hefty steering adjustments while you're accelerating after the front end is kicked out, it will throw you off. It'll straight up spit you onto the grass sometimes, and you do definitely have to get accustomed to that. It's actually a lot more like an LMP car than its looks would suggest. Now that's not a bad thing. It means that for the right driver, especially when you get more used to it than I have, given that this is literally the first time I've driven it, then of course you could get it to be a lot quicker. And I have no doubt that you could get it way quicker than I did, because there are certain cars that you can just feel the innate potential is there, and this is definitely one of those. The horsepower per tonne, the power, the weight, they're all very good. Now the car is certainly not for everyone. It's not a beginner-friendly car, nowhere near as much as the Group X car. It's the same price, 1,000,000 credits, and I would say this is definitely the more useful of the two, for obvious reasons. The fact that it's Group 1 alone makes it a whole lot more useful, but if you can afford to, I'd recommend checking out both, because for 2,000,000 credits you get a car which is considerably different, depending on which form you choose. The Group X car is interesting as a diversion, almost like the ultimate concept of this vehicle's intent, and then the Group 1 vehicle sounds and feels and performs kind of like a weird amalgamation of a GT car and a prototype put together. Very interesting car in both of its forms, very different, but both pretty cool, actually. This one, though, is the one to go for if you're only going to buy one of the two, purely because you can get more use out of it. But that's it for this pick overall. Of course, stick around on the channel for plenty more tunes and reviews of all of the cars in the game, and for now, as always, thanks for watching.